Hello, friends. I want to say to you, Happy New Year. We're broadcasting to you here on the 23rd of March, which, according to the biblical calendar, is the first of Nissan. And this is the biblical New Year's Day. So we could say to you, Happy New Year. And I actually think this is a big topic that's missed in the Jewish world and the Christian world and the secular world. The secular world is thinking about January 1st. I don't see much meaning to that. The Jewish world mostly thinks of Rosh Hashanah at the time of the Feast of Trumpets, which is not the primary biblical New Year. And mostly the Christian world doesn't really think it's that important one way or the other. But according to the Bible, this is in, I want us to look right now in Exodus chapter 40. The first day of the first month is Nissan, and this is it today. So let's look. Did anything important happen on this day? And I'm just praying that God would help to communicate this, because I feel like I've been carrying around this big thing. I'm saying nobody is understanding this. So let's look at it. Exodus chapter 40 verse 2 says, B'yom ha'chodesh harishon be'achad lachodesh takim et mishkan ohel moed. And this is God speaking to Moses, and he says, on the first month, on the first day of the month, set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. And they do it, and then on verse 17, he goes over there. He says, "Vayhi b'chodesh harishon b'shana hashinit b'achad l'chodesh hukam hamishkan." And it says, and on the first month of the second year of the first day of the month, the tabernacle was set up. Now, what does that mean? Let's just give this a little historical context. You know, the children of Israel came out of Egypt. The first chapters of the first half of the book of Exodus, they came out on Passover. When is that? The 14th day of the first month, the 14th day of this month, which is Nissan, in another 2 weeks. And then they came out, and took them a little while to get to Mount Sinai, and then you have the giving of the law, and that was maybe about 2.5 months from there. And then the rest of that time, they're spending mostly dedicated to setting up this tabernacle. They're getting details after details after details. They finally build the whole tabernacle. It's all ready. They get to the end of this time, and Bezalel and Oholiab bring all the material to Moses. Moses says, looks good, and God says, all right, set it up. They set up the whole tabernacle on the New Year's Day. You think that's not significant? I think it is. And notice it said this is the first day of the month of the second year. In other words, the first year, it was all this time. It took them exactly a year. Well, actually 11.5 months to get it if they came out on Passover. They came out, and now they've set up the tabernacle on the first day of the first month of the second year from the time that they left Egypt. Now, it's interesting, I just want you to note this, that if you remember that the Feast of Purim is on the 14th of the month of the last month, which is the 12th month, which is Adar, and the Passover is on the full moon, the 14th day of the first month, which is Nissan. So, it's 2 weeks after Purim and 2 weeks before Passover that you have the new biblical New Year's Day. So we have Purim 2 weeks behind us and Passover 2 weeks in front of us. It's right there. You can always know when the new year is. When you hit Purim, it's another 2 weeks to go. And when you're 2 weeks before Passover, no, that's the time of the new year. Now, I think that the whole Bible is another teaching. I've taught on this a lot, but the whole setup of the stars and the months. There's 12 moons, which makes 12 months, and you have the holy days according to the stars, and the whole biblical plan is spelled out symbolically across the calendar system. Now, I've been thinking about this tabernacle as well that was set up on this New Year's Day. Now, you have to realize they didn't have a Bible back then. They didn't have a global broadcast coming from us. Of course, they had Moses and the cloud of the presence of the Lord. But what I think that they saw in the tabernacle was it was like a play. It was a silent play. It was symbolic act that was being acted out in front of them for them to learn the lessons from it. That was, if I could put it this way, that was their Bible. It was a printing press Bible, and they thought about it. And they were looking at it. And it gets set up right in front of them and revealed to them on the first day of the month. The temple is set up. I think they spent all those 40 years meditating on what is the symbols of. How come you have to have a sacrifice? How come you have to wash your hands? How come there's a holy of holy place? How come only one person gets to go in? They're thinking about this all this time. So this was a big deal. This was, I'm going to say, it's kind of like the publishing of the first Bible. And when did it happen? On the first day of the year. Now think of this. On New Year's Day, it's the beginning of the plan. Now, in God's world, remember, God planned things beforehand. So what happens on the first day is what he plans to be at the end. Remember, let's go back to creation. God created the Garden of Eden. And then we messed it up by our sin. It's taking God a long time to work with us to get it set back up again and restore it. But when you see the Garden of Eden, you see the beginning, the model of what God wants to reproduce for the whole world. And there's something about this first day. Why would God have this? That on the first day of the first month, the tabernacle is set up. Well, one option is there's no meaning to it. Just happened to be on the first day of the month. Well, okay, could be. But I think the first day of the first month, the New Year's Day, which seems to be so popular in the secular world and the Jewish world, and they've all got the wrong dates, I think there is importance to it. And the importance to it is, the first part of it here, is that the tabernacle is set up. Now we learn, as of course when we come into the new covenant, that Yeshua said, the tabernacle is my body, the tabernacle is us, the people of faith, that God, he's setting up. This is what God had in mind, that you and me, that we would all become the remnant of Israel and the ecclesia of the nations, that we would become the tabernacle of God. You're one part of that tabernacle. I'm one part of that tabernacle. This is the New Year's message. I mean, isn't that better than getting drunk with the seculars or just eating apples and honey with our people? You know, it's all good, but I'm saying there's something special here, realizing if it's the first day of the first month of New Year's, it's saying the meaning, not the tabernacle itself, but the meaning that that tabernacle is the people of God, and that's what God has designed, and it's a pattern that God gave to Moses from heaven to show us, to say this is his plan, and he set it up on the first day of the first year to say, this is what I've been thinking from the beginning. Wow, that's enormous. Can you get this? The meaning of New Year's is not what you have thought it is. The meaning of New Year's is that God has a plan for you and me and for the human race, that we would become the tabernacle of God. Now, of course, the word for tabernacle in Hebrew is mishkan. And the word, the root, shin kaf nun, shachan, means to dwell in, to dwell inside of it. Like a person dwells in an apartment. So is there anything special about that? It's not just to be a mishkan, it's to be a dwelling place. That God's purpose from the very beginning, day one, New Year's Day, this is the meaning, the real meaning of New Year's Day, is that God had a plan from the beginning that he would build all of us together into a tabernacle, a dwelling place. Oh, so we're supposed to be a tabernacle? No. Read down a few more verses. Here's what happened. Now here's the New Year's Day. You ready? I'm exploding with this. Lord, help me get this across. Here it is. Verse 34. Exodus chapter 40, verse 34. This is what I believe the Bible is saying is the real meaning of New Year's. If this doesn't bless you, I don't know what will. And it says, here's what happened on New Year's Day. Verse 34, it says, and the cloud covered over the tent of meeting, and the glory of Yahweh filled the tabernacle. That's the meaning of New Year's. And it's not the tabernacle, of course, that's a model. It's a pattern, a symbolic pattern that God gave to Moses so that the people could study and learn it. And then we saw the big fulfillment on Pentecost when the Holy Spirit came down in the book of Acts, chapter 2, filled all the people. But now we see it's going to be greater than that. It's not 120 people in Jerusalem. It's not 3,000 people in Jerusalem. It's billions of people all over the world. This is God's plan for planet Earth. This is God's plan for the human race. This is God's plan for you and me, that we would all become this tabernacle together, not just you alone, not just me alone, but we would all become a tabernacle from the courtyard to the inner court to the holy place to the Holy of Holies, that we all become this tabernacle, and that God would dwell on the inside of us. His Spirit, His cloud, His fire, His glory would dwell on the inside of the human race from every nation around the whole world. That is God's plan for the human race, and it has been His plan from the very first day of New Year's Day. And that's the meaning that we see for the tabernacle, and that's what we want to step in. This is what God's plan is for you and me, and that is the meaning of New Year's. Now you think of it, this is New Year's, and from that then you go to the Passover, you go through all the feasts and the harvest season, the spring holidays, you come all the way around to Purim, which shows you what's going to happen, and it was history past, but it will also be history in the end times. It's this whole, God is displaying across history and across the yearly calendar and across the holy days. He is describing to us what His predestined plan is. But on the first day, the first meaning is that you and I would all become the tabernacle of God, and He would piece us together into one dwelling place, and that He would live on the inside of us. And of course we know from the book of Ephesians that this tabernacle is the community of faith. Yeshua is the first cornerstone of building the temple, the tabernacle, and, well, He's also the high priest. Well, He's also the sacrifice. I mean, the whole thing is Yeshua from beginning to end. He's the Holy of Holy place. He's in the atonement cover of the mercy seat. He's the high priest. He's the sacrifice. He's everything. This is all being built around Him. But this is the plan of God. Now, when you think about this, hold on, one more thing. You ready? When the cloud came down on the tabernacle, it was the cloud. Remember, it was a cloud by day. It's a pillar. It's a cloud by day and a fire by night. And the cloud, it gives them a little bit of coverage from the hot sun. From the fire, it gives them heat and light in the night. But in the middle of that pillar is a person. It is the angel of Jehovah. He's in that cloud. That person is Yeshua. So when that cloud, when that glory covered the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle, that was Yeshua coming down in this cloud of glory to fill up the tabernacle right in front of the eyes of all the people of Israel and the mixed multitude that had come out of Egypt. And He did that on New Year's Day. Wow. Are we getting this? That you see, I mean, Asher, what are you saying? You're talking about the whole plan of God for the whole universe, and it's all happening on this one day, which is New Year's Day. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that give the New Year's Day a better meaning than we've thought of it before? One last thing, let's look how he finishes up the chapter. This is in Exodus chapter 40. He goes on, it says, "V'lo yichol Moshe lavo el moed, ki shachan alav he'enan uchvod Adonai malei et hamishkan." It was so thick, the presence of God there, that Moses couldn't even get into the temple, let alone the priests or the Levites or the regular people or the mixed multitude. Even Moses couldn't get into it. It was so thick, it was so powerful. And then the people learned that they were not going to move. They were stunned by what had happened. Remember, this whole first year, that hasn't been there. They just have the tabernacle now, and God's given these plans about how to fold up the tent and fold up the tabernacle and the courtyard and put them on those wagons and travel out with them. And the last verse here, it says that the people would only move, they would watch it when the cloud would go up out of the tabernacle. The cloud, the pillar of cloud and fire with Yeshua inside of it, would go up out of the tabernacle and then begin to move on. when that happened, they had very, very specific orders how to go in and how to cover up the Ark of the Covenant, put it in take the poles, lift it up, fold up the holy place, fold up all the courtyards, put it on the wagons, line up which tribe would go first, how they would begin to proceed out and march out, and then they would follow the cloud out. And then he said, well, they wouldn't move. If the cloud didn't move, they didn't move. God said, now listen, you don't know how long it is. Could be one day, could be 30, 40 years, but when the cloud moves, you move. If it's every day, you move every day. If it doesn't move for 40 years, you don't move for 40 years. But the point is, you don't make up your plans. They assembled themselves in a big circle around this tabernacle. The presence of the Lord was inside of it. And when the presence of the Lord would get up and move forward, then the whole camp would mobilize, all 2-3 million people of them. They would mobilize quickly, fold everything up, fold up their own tents, line up according to the tribes, and go out and follow after the cloud. Which is the next thing for you and me to learn for this day, another lesson for New Year's Day, which is that we, as the community of faith, both in Israel and all the nations, we are to follow after the presence of God. This is not about us making up our own plans, running our ministries, building a congregation. This is about us watching the presence of God, letting the presence of God lead us, whether it's to stay in one place or whether it's to move on. So this is all the meaning of the New Year's Day. It's at a change of seasons. In the Middle East here, as I said, there's a drastic change from winter to summer pretty much on this day. We don't really have much of a fall or a spring here. It's really, the two seasons change radically on this day of the New Year's. And this is when we go into a new season. So this New Year's also means for you and me that it is a change of seasons. It is moving over from one to another. We need to be ready for new beginnings. Whatever it is, this is the day of the year symbolically. Now, of course, it could be any day of the year, but this is in God's calendar, a day symbolically, particularly for us to remember that this is the day of a new year, of a new season, of a new beginning. This is the time for us to put everything that we've had up until now, put everything in the past behind us, as Paul said in Philippians 2 and 3, to put the past behind us, to break free, and to go forward, to run forward, to go upward to our calling in Yeshua, not just individually, but all of us together. So I really hope that we can see that this first day of this New Year's, this first day of all of the biblical calendar, has the whole plan of God in it in a seed form right at the beginning. Now that really blesses us because it makes us understand the total sovereignty of God. I also feel like saying, hey, do you all get this? The first day of the first month, I've got the whole thing planned out for you. Yeshua coming into the tabernacle, you being filled with the presence of God, you becoming the tabernacle, you following after me, and go. It's all right there. And we take all this time to set it up. Now think the whole year was there, detail of making all the parts of the tabernacle, the clothes of the priest, how to set up the ark, how to set up where they would do the sacrifices, and get all that set up piece by piece, gold and silver and purple and shani, scarlet red, all these different, and get that all together and be ready for the Lord to come in. And he said, on this day, the temple was both set up, let's put it, the work was finished, it was set up, the Spirit of God filled it, and they would follow after the Spirit as it moved. All this is here on the New Year's Day for us to think about. So I want us to pray for that together, that we would all become this tabernacle. We would understand how important this is in God's plan for this first moment. The whole year was taken to set up this tabernacle. All of history, God is investing in setting up this tabernacle, you and me, so that ultimately the plan on the first day is the same thing as the completion on the last day. Let me say that again. The plan on the first day is the same plan that gets completed on the last day. God starts with his plan, and we have to finish it up by the last day. I mean, there's no wasting of time at the beginning. He wants to explain to what his plan is for us to be his tabernacle. And it takes as long as it takes us to come together this tabernacle and be filled with his presence. And that's the end. That's the beginning to the end. The new year the new year is also the last day of the last year. It's the beginning and the end. This is the holiday that represents the beginning and the end, the new creation. And you can see that in the Bible. You've heard me teach on that before, that how the beginning chapters of the Bible, Genesis 1, 2, and 3, match up the last 3 chapters of the book of Revelation. What God plans in the beginning, he completes at the end. There's a rabbinic saying that's very famous that it says, what is first in thought is last in completion. That this was thought of and planned on the first day, completed on the last day, and comes into fruition. So if the first day of the first month, the new year, has all of the plan of God in it already, planned and then completed on the same day, then it says that the whole rest of the year, the whole rest of history is all planned out by God, and God has a sovereignty. He's controlling everything from the stars to history to geography to the holy days to the scriptures to the plan of God. Well, and all you and I have to do is submit to it and understand it. So I want to pray for you that we would be able to step into the plan of God, realize that this pattern was given to Moses from heaven. This was not something that Moses made up. It wasn't something that Bezalel had a good idea of how to make something in creative artwork. This was a plan that was given to Moses from heaven. The tabernacle was filled with the presence of God, and then the temple of David and Solomon, and then finally the people of God in the day of Pentecost. And in our day, at the end of history, it's the people of God from all the nations of the world, us becoming a tabernacle together to be the dwelling place of God. I'm trying to say this, I'm still not sure you got it. Let me see if I can say it one more time. This same building of the tabernacle that went out throughout history, it's coming to a place of fulfillment in our generation that it never has before. It was not fulfilled. It was only partially fulfilled in the tabernacle of Moses. It was only partially fulfilled in the temple of David and Solomon. And it was only partially fulfilled when the first believers, the 120 and the 3,000, they became the first tabernacle and were filled with the presence of God. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about something that takes the whole history until the very last day. The tabernacle was set up on the last day, which means the real tabernacle, which is the people of God in every single nation of the world, will only finally be set up on the last day of the year, the last moment. That's what's happening now. The real New Year's on the real last day of the year is just about to happen. I want us to cooperate with this plan that in every nation, from America to Asia to Europe to Asia to, of course, here us Jews and Arabs in the Middle East, that we would allow ourselves. God is putting all these pieces of the tabernacle. We're coming up right to that day, this last day, where Bezalel is bringing all this material to Moses and says, here it is. And God says, that's it. On the last day, set it up. On the first day of the year, set it up, and I'm going to fill it with my presence. That's a message of God's plan for all of history. You and I are coming to the end of history. We're coming up to the last day of history when all of a sudden, boom, what's been worked on the whole year gets set up. And all of a sudden you see it, something you couldn't see one day before. History has never seen. We've never seen. The people of God becoming the living, the dwelling place of God, the temple of God, the tabernacle of God. All those are symbols. They're giving that all over the world, and it's all the pieces get prepared for a long time, the whole year, and then the last day, whoosh, they all get put together, they get set up, and the Spirit of God fills it up, and the angel of Jehovah walks into his temple, and it leads us on out into the future. So, that's it. That's why I said to you, Happy New Year's. That's what this day is, the first day of Nissan. And I pray for this to be able to come out, that for all of us to understand that God's plan is the same from beginning to end. And that's part of the message of this New Year's Day, biblical New Year, that he's sovereign. His plan has been the same from beginning to end. And you don't see it. He's preparing all the pieces until the last moment. It all comes together. It's a beautiful tabernacle, and he comes and fills it with his presence. Will you pray with me for this? Father, we pray for all right now, for the Jewish people, for the international church, for the secular world, for everybody, to look at this moment and say, what this New Year's Day is a message of God's plan from beginning to end. Lord, help us to understand it, not just to understand it, help us to yield to it. Help us to become our parts of this tabernacle and share it with others so that they can become parts of the tabernacle, so that, Lord, you can put us in these last days, put us together in this beautiful dwelling place for you, that we can open our hearts and your Spirit and your glory and your power can come and dwell inside of us, and we would all become a living tabernacle of living stones, people of different colors all over the world, that we would become the dwelling place of God, filled with his presence. And that's the message we learned from you on this first day of Nissan. Happy New Year. God bless you in Yeshua's name.